Hello everyone, welcome to Fairly Based. I'm your host Henry, and today I would like to show you my foolproof take on the popular Coconut Crab fan scheme using some Hormagaunts. I really like the more natural look it brings to the Tyranids, and based on the general excitement online, I'm confident that a lot of you do too. This is my version of Battle Ready, but the techniques here apply to a lot of other colors and models. This is my first video, so I do apologize for any inconsistencies in the video or the audio. Everything I'm going to show you here is very beginner friendly. If you're just starting out in the hobby, you can absolutely achieve this level of painting and far exceed it with a little skill. So without further ado, please like and subscribe to the channel, and let's get into the video. First up, we're going to start by giving the models a quick prime with some Wraithbone. I'm using the rattle can for right now because I would not recommend airbrushing that paint. I will be doing a video soon though on some alternatives you can use to avoid GW's premium price. Once you've done that, go ahead and take some Games Workshop Leviathan Blue contrast paint and block out all the claws, teeth, and hooves. It is a contrast paint, but it does have an excellent opaque color straight out of the pot. I've noticed the spray primer leaves almost a water-resistant finish sometimes, so don't be afraid to go back and touch up any sharp edges where the contrast paint pulls away. For battle line units like this, I would absolutely recommend batch painting if you can. I personally am not a big fan of it because I enjoy the painting process, but it is undeniable how much faster everything goes to get it to the table. Whether or not you decide to fully batch paint, I would do this and the next few steps on your full unit. Once you've got your base coat of Leviathan Blue in all your models, go ahead and pull out your airbrush if you have one. You can do this without an airbrush if you don't have one or you like blending a lot, but it does save a lot of time to just airbrush it if you can. Take some Army Painter Royal Cloak and pop it in your airbrush with a few drops of thinner. Don't forget to stir this around. Go ahead and spray about the last third to half of all the blue areas. This should give you a nice fade effect. You can try to block off any unwanted areas, but I've actually found that it takes longer to mask everything than it does to clean up any overspray afterwards. Don't shy away from doing this on any of the smaller areas like the hooves or the smaller secondary claws. Remember, it's always easier to go up and clean this up afterwards than it is to blend it. As you can see, this will give our miniatures a nice little pop of bright blue that'll make the claws and such stand out across the tabletop. Once you're done with spraying and cleaning out your airbrush, go ahead and use some thinned down Wraithbone to clean up any spots where you oversprayed or missed with the primer. Then we're going to take some Army Painter Tanned Flesh and paint a rough line covering about 1/3 of each carapace section. Note that this is in about the middle of each side of the carapace, so we will still have an unpainted section running down the center if you look from the top down. Don't worry about being too careful with this. The more uneven these edges are, the better. Don't forget the carapace on the legs and chest areas. Then we're going to fill in the center. You can use any dark brown you like for this. My favorite mix is Army Painter Dirt Splatter mixed with any black. I've mixed this in a dropper bottle with thinner already added to make my job easier. What we're going to do here is just come in and fill the spots between the tan lines so we get a nice effect where the brown fades to tan, fades to Wraithbone on the outside. On larger models, I have found it is easier to paint the borders for these colors and then fill them in afterwards. But on these little guys, it's easier to just use a slightly larger brush and get it all in one sweep. Again, don't forget the legs and chest areas. I only emphasize this so much because of how many times I've painfully done exactly that. What I like to do after that is come in with a very fine brush and pick out all the raised bumps on the tail. This is not absolutely necessary, especially if you have a lot of these guys to paint, but if you're doing anything on an Endless Multitudes level, then this color scheme probably isn't for you anyways. After that, go back in with some Wraithbone, thin to the point where it flows easily but is opaque enough to cover with one coat. Load your brush and lightly touch the tip to the model so it leaves a small dot of paint. Go ahead and do this along the border between tan and Wraithbone, as well as about 2/3 into the tan. This will help to hide the transition between colors, and gives the iconic look that this color scheme is known for. Do your best to keep this as random and evenly spaced as possible. This especially becomes more important on larger and more centerpiece models, but you want even your battle line to look nice. Once we're done with that, come back in and do the exact same thing with Tanned Flesh going back into the Wraithbone. Remember, you don't have to be super careful with this. Try to make everything fairly random, but spots or even whole models that are too random or uniform will not stand out in groups of 10 or 20, especially if they get shot off the board turn 1 or 2. I'm doing larger dots here because it ends up just being a lot faster on battle line models like this, but on larger models I think it becomes a lot more important how you place them, and I think it looks a lot nicer with smaller dots as well. You can use a smaller brush for that, or if you have good brush control, just press lighter. As you can see, we've actually removed most of the Wraithbone from the carapace, but we leave enough so that it leaves us with our nice random dotting effect. Then repeat the same thing but on the brown border and going in towards the central ridges of the carapace. You can do the tanned flesh going both ways on each plate before moving on to the next, but I have found personally that doing it this way helps me make sure that I don't miss anything, especially when I'm quickly batch painting and I don't give each model as much attention. Finally, do this with your brown mix going back into the tanned flesh. You can see that this gets us a pretty nice looking transition between each of the colors. You can also take this time dotting to clean up any unwanted dots or places where you accidentally got paint. The model itself is not quite finished, but as we near the end of the dotting process, I really do think that this is when the model begins to come to life. After that, pull out any warm flesh wash you like. I use Seraphim Sepia from Games Workshop, but I have seen others use Agrexo Shade or Army Painter Flesh Tone and Light Tone. It all depends on the final shade you want. Thin this down a little bit and then wash the whole model. Try to keep this off the claws if you can, because those you'll have to touch up later. As you can see, this gives our Wraithbone a little depth while turning the tanned flesh a nice shade of orange and darkening the brown areas. Don't be afraid to let it pool a little in certain areas within reason, because it does add depth to the model. When it comes to the tail, just slap some wash on it, then gently wipe the paint away with your finger. Don't overthink this, it eliminates any wash that pools weirdly. One thing of note is that this overall model wash of the Seraphim Sepia does turn your Wraithbone from that off-white to a more khaki tan. I like this look because it provides a nice contrast and blends nicely with the orange of the tan on the carapace, but if you want to keep that nice crisp white color of the Wraithbone, then either go back and add some highlights or keep your wash selective to the carapace and certain areas in between the chitin of the body. After that, grab some Army Painter Red Tone. You can also use Citadel Volupus Pink contrast paint. It does give a more opaque effect, but I like the more red look and the contrast that the red tone gives. Go ahead and paint in all the little vents and fleshy areas of the model. A lot of color schemes omit painting these a separate color and just instead choose to leave them as the main color of the body, but I love the little details that they add to the model. They make me think of all the weird fleshy bits of the Xenomorphs from the Aliens franchise. Let's be honest, that's what the Tyranids are. So we've got a pretty nice looking gaunt here, and you absolutely could stop now, but I think there's one final step that you should go if you want to just push it a little farther. And for that last step, we're going to grab some dark tone and slap that into the recesses between the carapace plates. Don't dilute this down, just go straight from the dropper. This will dry a lot less opaque than you think. I think this really helps define all the large carapace plates that we've just spent a while painting, especially from farther away on the table. I think if there's one downside to the look of the Coconut Crab color scheme is that everything is really well blended together, which makes for a really nice look up close, but from farther away it can be hard to distinguish sometimes. I think adding in that dark tone just takes it the extra step that helps define everything. And since we do care about the details, go ahead and take your black of choice and just pick out the eyes. And then go back and grab some of that Volupus Pink I talked about earlier and fill in the tongue. And don't forget basing. If you go down to your local game store to play a game with your models fully painted but unbased, you might just leave with a black eye, so don't forget to paint the tactical rocks and such to match your basing. And boom! Some pretty nice looking Hormagaunts, and fairly foolproof too. I would say that I'm far from an expert painter, and I'm able to knock these out pretty quick and easily. If this tutorial helped you out at all, I would greatly appreciate if you took just 1 second of your time to like, subscribe, and all the YouTube pleasantries. It helps me make better content and put more of it out. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.